What's happening? What's happening? Can everybody hear me? Hello, can anybody hear me? How is the audio? We having some storms here in the area, so my Wi-Fi is acting up. So I'm using regular data tonight on my tablet and all, and not sure how good the connection is and all. All right, Thursday evening, July something. Don't even know what the day is. I mean, what the date is. It's been so long since I've done a video. I just had a lot going on since the first of the year. I will warn you that my wife and kid is not here, and the cat and the dog in there is messing around. So if you see me looking around or hear something, it's probably them. I may have to get up and go tend to them in a minute. But anyway, been real busy this year. Here's the kitty cat. And just we've been trying to get things done, trying to get stuff done at the shop. Been real busy at the shop. It's been a pretty decent year. I've done a little racing here and there. Just between that and home stuff, and just been hard to get a video, get it done. And plus in this room here where I do it at, we've got some stuff stored in here right now. I've actually got a little square cut out right here where I'm sitting. We've got stuff stored in here, so it's been kind of hard for me to get in here and get around and get something done. The cats found when I was moving stuff around, a stock valve retainer fell off on the floor, and the cat's pushing it around. Alright, but anyway, get to it. Enough about the kitty cat. We can tonight I want to go over some stuff that I get a lot, tons of calls about camshafts. I've done a video before about, modifieds, choosing the right cams, choosing the right carburetors, head work and stuff, but I never specifically done anything on the cam. So I figured we would do one tonight. And basically what I'm gonna go over is, standard lift, duration, lobe separation, overlap, center lines, basic stuff like that. I'm not going to do any cam recommendations on stuff like that. I'll tell you the things that I run, but just not going to go into what's better for this or what's better for that. Just going to kind of tell you what it does, and then let you make an educated guess on what you may need for your situation. I mean, of course, if you call me or message me and tell me what your setup is, I'll give you a recommendation, but this is kind of going over the ins and the outs of what makes a cam do this and what makes a cam do that, and why some aspects of the profile is better for this type of racing and some for that. First off, I got a few cams here I brought. They're all modified cams. I got a billet cam. I'm gonna go over how to set up a billet cam too later on. I got like a standard 308, and I got like an F275 here, and I got a this is a BP2, I believe. Yeah. All right. Start off basically. The first thing about a cam is just basic lift. Everybody knows what lift is. Lift is how much the cam actually lifts the valve off of the seat. Okay, Mino Gino is a unlimited run what you run racer from the north. This is a 4-stroke thing, man. You're a 2-cycle man. You need to smoke that way. Thanks for coming by, man. I appreciate it. Lift is nothing more than the cam, how much it lifts the valve off the seat. And everybody knows that more lift, will let more air in. It creates more flow, gets more air in there. That's pretty self-explanatory. Lift is lift. More lift, more air, more you get in, more power it's gonna make. Now the confusing part about cam is duration. Duration is exactly what it says. Duration. That is how long the valve is left open for a duration of the rotation of the crankshaft or the cam. It's how long it stays off the seat for the duration of the stroke. That's usually duration and is the basically the width of the lobe toward the top. You know, you got lobes that's shaped like this. This is a standard 308 right here. You know, of course, you see it's a high lift cam, or it's considered a high lift cam. It's hard to increase lift on a cam without increasing duration, because as the lift goes up, you know, you've got to let the lobe get a little wider. But typically, cams with, you know, higher lift and what I call a moderate duration, you know, they'll be a good, you know, a mid-range cam. They'll have top end. You know, when you increase duration, that's going to increase the power making ability through the mid and especially the upper end of the RPM range. You'll get a benefit gain throughout the entire curve, but it's going to be more through the mid and the top, because it's going to hold that valve open longer to allow, you know, for more of the duration of the stroke, and it's going to allow more air and fuel in. Increasing duration without increasing lift, like the Mod 2 cam. You know, it is a stock lift cam. This is actually a BP2. I didn't bring a Mod 2 in, but it's just basically the same type cam. The Mod 2 is a stock lift cam with real high duration, which means the lobes look basically squared off on it. You know, the valve is opened a little bit, but held open for a long period of time. This is the type of cams that were made for, you know, stock appearing engines with lift rules. Because back when the AKRA stock appearings first come out, they had a lift rule of 285 thousandths. So that's where the F275 cam come in. That's specifically what it was made for. But that's where these low lift, high duration cams were beneficial, because you couldn't have it so much lift, duration was wide open. So they would make really wide duration, you know, 255, 260, 262 duration cams, so that instead of it being a lot of lift to let the air in, the duration would stay open longer to allow more air in. It's kind of cheating the lift rule, but it works. But when you increase duration, to me, now this is just me. This is not, you know, what a cam manufacturer would probably tell you, or what they told me. But increasing duration seems to broaden power curves in the stuff that I use it in. You know, like I can take a 308, you know, with 1-to-1 rockers on it, put it in a little stock appearing. It'll make really good power, especially in the mid to upper RPM range. I could take that 308 out and put an F275 in, and it might lose a little bit of peak, but in my engines, it tends to broaden the curve out. It means it gets to the power a little quicker, kind of flat lines, and kind of holds it a little longer. It just kind of depends on what you're using the engine for. If you want it to be a top end screamer, or if you want it to be, you know, you want to back your RPMs up a little bit and still make good power. You know, that's where you get into the how much lift and how much duration do I use. Now there are some cams out there that's got, you know, really high lift and, you know, less duration than what it really needs, but you can't put but so much lift in a cam with, like I say, without expanding the duration, because the cam will be too steep. And we're running flat tappets here, you know, which means the tappet is flat and runs on it. And if you get that too steep, it's going to eat the side of the cam up, or it could mess up the lifter, cause the lifter to rock inside and wear the guide out. So you have to increase duration a little bit as you increase lift. Now, as you increase duration, you're going to have to increase spring pressure most of the time. Like I say, this is an F275 cam. This is one of my favorite cams. I use this cam in all my stock appearings, basically. Most of my like outlaw type builds with, you know, 1 to 3 rockers on it. But this is a very aggressive ramp cam. It's 278 lift, but it's, you know, 256, 258 duration on it. That's a lot of duration. It's got a fast ramp on it. You will actually need more spring pressure with this 278 lift than you would with this 308, because it's got a little less duration. It's a smoother. When people say the cam is easy on the valve train. This is what they're talking about. The cam is, you know, fairly high lift, has enough duration to do the job, but it's don't have enough duration where the ramp is super fast, and it's easier on the valve train. You know, you can run a 28, 32 pound spring on this 308 and get 85, 8600 out of it, where you would need a 36, 38, possibly a 40 on this F275, especially if you're running ratio rockers, because of how fast the ramp is on this thing and all the duration that it's got. But these cams here are pretty rough on the valve train. I tell folks, you know, when you're going to go to an F275, especially with ratio rockers, you know, stainless valves are an absolute must. You know, billet retainers, absolute must. You know, 36 is the minimum spring I'd run on this for the 1-to-1 because of the fast ramp. And then when you put ratio rockers on a fast ramp cam, you know, that's got high duration, that increases the ramp speed because it changes the ratio of how much the valve opens and how quickly it opens. So, you know, lift and duration is one of the main things most moderate backyard DIY regular Joe engine builders is going to need to look at, because that's going to tell them a lot about what the cam's going to do far as in their engine. And then when you go to the ratio rockers, I tell people, anytime you go to a ratio rockers, stainless valves, you know, dual springs, at least a 36 to a 38 single spring is what you're going to need, because it's going to increase the ramp of the speed ramp of the cam, and it's also going to increase the lift. You know, 1.2 ratio rocker, you take the lift of the cam, 308 times 1.2. That's going to give you the total lift at the valve. It's going to increase the total lift of the cam by 1.2 is around 20%, 1.3 is around 30%. Does it change duration? Yes and no. It just kind of gets to the duration a little quicker and maybe holds the duration a little bit longer. There's a big, theory out there of some people that says it does not increase duration. It does increase duration. I tell people it increases ramp speed, which makes the cam think it has more duration. So that's still up in the air. Does it increase duration? Don't. It just increases the ramp speed, makes the cam think it has more duration. It's going to increase the power curve of the engine. It's going to make power a little quicker, going to hold power a little bit longer because of the added lift and the added ramp speed. But with these high duration cams, even the BP2, the BP2 is the bigger stepbrother of the Mod 2. Now I don't know how good you can see this here, but the BP2 is maxed out on duration far as the builder prepared rules that were written back in like 2013 or 14. But anybody that's ever had a BP2, there's a little line right there, and it's actually a squared sharp line on each side because of the maximum duration that the rules allowed at the time. Now, I think those rules are still in place. I hadn't built any true BPs in a while. There it is. You can see it good there. Now, that's an actual squared lobe cam right there. This cam will take more spring pressure than the Mod 2 will. The Mod 2 is a good drop-in, middle of the road, easy installation cam that most people can put in. You can throw 22 pound springs on, up to 26 pound springs. It's going to work good with all of them. That's a go-to for a lot of people because it's easy to put in. A lot of people with the BP2 find out that a lot of times 22 pound springs isn't enough because of all the extra duration that's on this thing. I'm a fan. I like the BP2 better than the Mod 2 because of the extra duration. Once you learn how to use stuff like that, you'll find out those cams are a lot better. Now, if we got any questions here? Yeah, that's something else that ain't no real questions here as a comment though about bottom out the springs and stuff like that. That's something I covered that in another video a while back. I didn't realize this, but I got like almost 40 videos out there. I forget what it's called. I'll look it up and post it for you later on. But anytime you put in a bigger cam in these engines, especially a Hemi, I don't care if it's a Honda, the GX200, the 196, non-Hemi Predator, Hemi Predator, the Ducar engines, whatever. Anytime you put in a cam that's got more lift than stock, and I consider stock to be 240,000. So a Mod 2 is like, 242, 243. But anytime you put in something bigger than stock, you must check coil bind. I don't care what springs you're using. I don't care what somebody said. These will work. Always put them in. Put your springs in. Set your lash at 0. Roll the engine around by hand and make sure that you got enough area before the spring completely coil binds, because the Hemi is the world's worst. I mean, on the exhaust side of the Hemi is very, very short, and 9 times out of 10 when I put a 308 in a Hemi, it coil binds the exhaust side every single time. But not only do you want to make sure that it goes, but what I tell people to do, since I use gauges and stuff for this on how to check for coil bind, but there's an easy way you can do it also, is set it at 0 lash, run it all the way down to this all the way this full lift. Rotate the engine back and forth, make sure you're at full lift. You can get a screwdriver, or something to put underneath the rocker and make sure it goes down a little bit further. That's not the correct way to do it. That's not the engine builder's way to do it, but that is a regular Joe way that I've showed people that don't have all these gauges and measuring devices to find out, to make sure that not only is their spring not fully collapsed, that they got a little extra, but also that their rocker is not bottoming out. Because that's 2 problems that a lot of people have when going to little bigger cams, is they don't understand that the stock rocker is not made for more than about 200 and maybe 75 thousandths lift at the most. A lot of time a 308 with stock rockers and stock link push rods will bottom out, and it bends the stud. Most of the time it bends the stud just enough to where it'll run for a while and wind up breaking the rocker. But that's why we got the shorter push rods in. I think they're the 5160s, part number DJ1070 CM16. They're a little bit shorter, which will pull that rocker down a little more to give it a little more before it bottoms out. But always check coil bind. Even if you're using, true roller gauge rockers, run it up to max lift. Get you a screwdriver with a piece of, wrap it in tape so it don't scratch stuff up, and just make sure that it'll move a little more. And you're checking spring coil bind and the rocker to make sure it still moves. Plus, sometimes the retainer will bottom out on the guide if you got tall guides in it. So stuff like that is very important to check to make sure that everything moves and it's got plenty of room. Alright, basic lift and duration, that's all that is. Lift, how much, durations, how long it's off the seat. Using those 2, I've always built engines where I like moderate lift cams with higher duration, and I like using ratio rockers on it. I've just found that I can make a broader power curve, maybe not as much peak power, but I'll give up a little bit of power at peak to get a broader curve. I'm not saying the 308 won't make that. I've just found some stuff with the higher duration F275s with 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 rockers that I like, the way my carburetor's tuned and the way I do engines and heads. I can rework the way I do a head and get power out to 308 if I want one that turns really, really high. But typically, most of my outlaw stuff, I try to keep it under 85. There's people out there that if it don't turn 8800 or 9000, it ain't running. Well, my stuff don't tear up a whole lot. Knock on wood, the next one I build might sling apart, but that's because I've learned how to build engines that make power where you actually need it at, instead of having to turn one 9000 to make it run. It's better and it's cheaper to do it that way. It makes things a little more dependable. Now, another aspect of these cams is lobe separation. This gets into more of the, you're an actual you're building and you're degreeing cams and you're getting them in to dang it, what did I do with it? I had a little printout of stuff up here. Anyway, lobe separation is, here it is. I call this the Dolly Parton effect. When people want to talk about lobe separation, this is what they're talking about. This is the upper view if you were standing over Dolly Parton looking down at her. Alright, lobe separation is exactly what it sounds like. It's the amount that each lobe on the cam, you got an exhaust and you got an intake. Just like that. Let me get it straight. Dang, I hate working with this camera backwards. That's kind of it. Dolly Parton effect. So you gotta. That is just the how much degrees of separation the intake lobe has over the exhaust. Lobe separation, that affects things like overlap, vacuum on the engine. It affects the idle, the power curve. Increasing the lobe separation. Usually, if you increase the lobe separation, usually what that does is it brings the power band up a little bit higher. If you close that separation up a little bit, it'll bring the power curve down. Like you see some cams, that Isky make, that Dyno makes, that Precision makes. They come with a paperwork, and it's got lobe separation and it's got a degrees. It might be 106, might be 108, might be like more of the stock cams like the CL2s and the CL3s and the stock cans that Precision make. They have some lobe separations and center lines on about 114. But you open up that lobe separation, that'll move the power curve one way. You close it up, it moves it down. That's all lobe separation is. And lobe separation and center lines they kind of work together. The center line is exactly also, that's the center line of each lobe at the very tip. That's all center line is. I thought I had another picture over here. All this stuff piled up on this table. Well, anyway, center line. Well, dang, where'd it go? I had 4 of these pictures. I got one piece of paper sitting up here now. Anyway, center lines and your lobe separation work together. And what that does, the center line, like I say, is the centerpiece of the highest lift of the lobe of the cam. Moving those in and out, up and down, forward and backwards, that moves the power curve. Usually a wider lobe separation and a higher center line number is going to move the curve up higher into the power curve of the engine. Usually a lower number is going to be, of course, lower. Take your center lines for, like I said, about what is a CL3, I think is what, 114. You move that 114 back to 112, the engine's going to make basically the same power, it's going to make it at a lower RPM, and the cam's going to fall off a little more on the top end. And that's one way, we're tuning these stock engines, is we're moving the center lines on them here and there, taking the cams that's designed for, top end power, backing the center lines up on them a little bit so we can run them in plate engines, because you want a little lower center line on those most of the time. Like I say, I get cams cut specifically for blue plates and red plates and purples, and I have cams specifically made for unrestricted stuff. But I have run the unrestricted cams in a purple plate. I just back the center line up a little bit on it by twisting the gear. That's another video I'm gonna do one day, and the cam will work fine. And with your center lines and with your lobe separation and with your duration, you get a thing called overlap. Now, overlap is when I've got something scratchy in my throat. Overlap is when both of the valves are open at the same time in a certain part of the rotation. When you hear me talk about stuff like header scavenging, scavenging is when, I've explained this a few times, is when the exhaust valve is open, the piston is coming up pushing the burnt exhaust gases out, and as that exhaust valve is closing, the intake valve begins to open, and the rush of air that's going out of that exhaust helps pull in, I don't know what happened, helps pull in air from the intake. Overlap benefits or hurts that, depending on how much or how little overlap you got. It increases vacuum in the engine. It'll mess with the idle. You make the idle sound real choppy or real smooth. But the overlap is something, that we work with in modified engines a lot, to help scavenge the engine better. That's why headers and stuff make such a big difference on stocker engines, because getting the air out of there too quickly, scavenging too much, can make the engine hard to tune. And scavenging not enough is what a lot of people call back pressure. Technically there is no back pressure on the engine. It's just the air is not moving out of the exhaust valve fast enough to help pull air in, so that's considered back pressure. But actually it's slow scavenging versus fast scavenging, which is also why in stock engines, I've argued with people about this a lot and proved it on the dyno hundreds of times, so has many other people. But if you got a stock engine, an AKRA, NKA stocker, that's tuned with a muffler, you take the muffler off of it, it sounds better, it sounds like it's turning up better, but I guarantee you 9 times out of 10 it's not making the same power curve that it was making before. It might make the same peak power, but the curve is going to be off. And likewise with an engine that was tuned without a muffler, you put one on it, it changes the scavenging, it changes the tune of that carburetor. You can retune the carburetor a little bit or retune the timing and get that power back. But just taking a muffler off and putting one on a lot of times hurts performance of most any engine out there, whether it's stock, modified, or whatever. Okay, but like I say, your duration affects overlap, a lot. Actually, center lines, everything affects overlap. More lift will affect overlap, duration, lobe separation, center lines, all that affects overlap. And that is at the end of the cycle. That is stroke number 4, pushing the exhaust gases out, where stroke number 1 begins again. You're trying to time that just right, and by using different length and different size and different chambered headers, different port designs, to get that rush of fuel out of there, or rush of burnt gases out, to help pull in that heavy wet air from the intake. That's why in modifieds, having the exhaust valve a certain percentage size of the intake valve is so important. I see people all the time putting these 32 millimeter intake valves on it, and they're trying to get a 28 to a 30 millimeter exhaust on there. That'll work pretty good at about 10,000 probably. But you got to keep that exhaust and the intake a certain percentage of each other of flow, to keep the scavenging like it needs to be. I got some pretty big names watching tonight. Look at here. That's right. I didn't show my t-shirt for tonight. As y'all know, the last video I done, I had on a shirt from one of my competitors. He's on tonight too. Also, he goes by the Gray Goat Garage, the OMB, Old Mini Bike Warehouse guy. His name's Eric. He goes by Gray Goat. He's on tonight, but I had on his shirt the last time, and he sent me another one. I was kidding with him one day. We was talking on the phone, and I said, I need a shirt, because every time somebody calls up or I see something online or this, that, and the other, I always say, I've got a video on that. So my man Eric sent me a shirt. He actually made this shirt that says, I got a video on that. Is that not cool? So thanks again, Eric. Everybody, that's 2 shows in a row that I've mentioned you. Of course, he mentions me just about every show he does, so I owe him a few shout outs. Does Wayne Powell run a 308 in his clone? Wayne's got a pretty good engine builder. It's not a 308, I don't think, but he's got a guy that builds his stuff that knows a little bit about. Oh, good Lord! I got some cam manufacturers watching tonight. How about that? Nick Woods. What about intake? For some reason I'm having a hard time seeing this. I got a glare on my screen. What about intake to exhaust flow in the head? Will that change the cam profile selection? Yeah. You know, it's like I was just talking about. These people putting these gigantic ass valves in it, you know, and then they choose the worst cam profiles that they can find. You know, for some reason, people think the biggest cam that you can find is gonna make the most power. You know, that's not true. Everybody wants these 356s with 1 to 3 rockers on it. Man, that's like 400 and ungodly lift. And then they want to put valves this big around and, you know, run a 390 carb on it or a 304 Tilliston. And wonder why it won't run. But yeah, intake to exhaust flow ratio. That's where you're gonna really get into your duration and your overlap. I would in overhead valves. I believe you build a lot more of the. Now back in the flathead days, like if I was building, actually that's what people called me about building opens this year for the Big O. Just didn't have time to get to them and really don't care about building none of them. Now, we was getting cams made. I've still got a grind that I used in one of mine that I took. It's common to do. People take a grind off of one cam lobe and take an intake off of this one and a exhaust off of this one. You know, maybe a 458, you know, intake with a 126 exhaust and change the center lines a little bit to try to work with, you know, whatever intake to exhaust ratio you got. But most of the people doing this have no idea what intake to exhaust ratio in a head is. All they know is they got some big old valves in it and we done hogged out the intake. Man, I could put my fist in it. And they get outrun by a Mod 2 cam with a stock appearing carburetor on it. Oh, Luke McGee's watching tonight. But they make some really good cams too. You know, we sell the dyno cams, you know, but I've used just about every cam out there that you can name right now. And McGee and them, they have some good cams, really good cams. Precision makes good cams. A lot of good cam manufacturers out there. Isky makes good cams. Do cams have a power band on the F275 and 308? I guess what you're meaning by that is an RPM rating. Yeah, I believe the F275 is rated for about, with 1-to-1 rockers, about 8,300, and the 308 I believe is rated for like 85. That's just a rating. That doesn't mean that when you get to 83, it's going to fall on its face and stop pulling. All that's going to depend on exactly what Mr. Nick Woods was talking about a while ago. Intake to exhaust ratio. Do you have, you know, are you over scavenging? Do you have too big of valves in it? Do you have too small a carburetor? You got too big a carburetor? Do you have enough spring on it? The biggest thing would be, are you running stock rockers or ratio rockers? You know, 1-to-1 rockers, 1-to-2s, 1-to-3s, 1-to-4s. They make 1-to-4s and 1-to-5s out there. I don't like getting into rockers that big. 1-to-3s is about as big as I like using because of the extra pressure that it puts on them. But you can change the power band of most any cam out there with, you know, head design, with with the right carburetor, like the video I done a while back about choosing the correct carburetor and cam and valve size for your engine. That's very important in making proper power bands. You can take this 308 here and, as they say, hog out the carburetor and hog out the head and put a big valve in it. It'll run good, especially in the upper RPM range, but you want to get the power curve where it needs to be from bottom to top, not just up in the top and it won't hardly pull off the line. You've got to have the right valve size, the right port design, and the right carburetor size to go along with the cam, running enough or not enough, or enough duration, lift, and all like that. Because you get these, stupid cat, you can take like the F275 and put 1 to 3 rockers on it, man. We've turned them, 92, 93 in some of these, short stroke long rod engines that we do. They're 2815, 2835, sometimes 2.9 stock crankshaft with a long rod, man. We'll turn the absolute snot out of them with an F275, but we've got, the correct head work done, the correct carburetor, ratio rockers and all that, which, the ratio rockers, as I said before, increases lift, speeds up the ramp of the cam. Same thing with the 308. A really good combination for like 14.5 and stuff, if you're using a 308, would be a 308 with like 1 to 2s. It increases the ramp speed, increases the lift, which will change the power curve of the cam. But pretty much all cams out there have what's called a power rating. They're rated for 7,500 or something like that, but all of them can be. Oh, my wife is watching the show. She's not here. She's at her grandmother's house tonight. Her mom and them come down, and that's where they're at. That's why Landon is not here. I'm sorry. I know y'all probably tune in to see him, but he is not here. Does the baffle on the valve cover help or hurt the intake vacuum? Has nothing to do with intake vacuum. The only thing that affects intake vacuum is the carburetor, the head, and is the valve sealed. Now the valve cover, the baffle and the valve cover can affect the performance of an engine in two ways. If that's the only thing you got on there and you're getting some blow by, or you're turning ungodly RPMs and making a lot of air, the air can't get out fast enough and can cause a little drag in the engine, or it can hold the oil up top, because you don't have enough relief in the engine and it's pushing the oil up. And another way I've seen the valve cover, people that pulse off the valve cover, is the little baffle in the valve cover actually wearing out over time and not sealing off really good and not getting a good pulse at low RPM to fill the carburetor up. But the baffle on the valve cover does not affect intake vacuum. Oh, it's a long one here. Wiener pipe. Wiener pipe versus big. Having to change between two different tracks every other weekend. One purple, one blue. Do I need to change jets? Good God. I have two engines somewhere up in the Northeast. One engine is a green plate, blue plate. The other engine is a red plate, purple plate. Two different classes. They go, it's a team, but they run different classes. And they wanted it tuned where they didn't have to change jets in the carburetor. So I come up with a little concoction, and I'm not saying these are the best engines I've ever done. I told them this. I said, they're a touch off of where they need to be, but all you're gonna have to do is change the plates and the pipes. It's no big deal. But if you want the best performing engine, now changing the pipes, we can tune them, especially a blue plate, to where you can go from a small pipe to a big pipe and the jetting not vary that much. But going from a purple to a blue, you're going to have to more than likely at least change the main jet, going to a bigger jet for the smaller plate most of the time. What are the sizes on the valves on a stock Predator? Would that be a generation 1, generation 2, or generation 3? Because the generation 1 that they originally come out with hadn't been made in several years, like 7 years maybe. They're still out there. They had the same valve sizes that come in the 196 clone, which is a 25-27 with 5.5 millimeter studs with the clip-on retainers. Generation 2 is the Hemi version. It has 27-25 valves, and when I say 27-25, that's what I'm talking about. The seats, the seats themselves are bigger valves, and the stems are 5.5 millimeter with a clip-on retainer. Now the generation 3, the non-Hemi Predator, has also 27-25 valve heads, seats, but the stems are 5 millimeters, which are smaller, and they have the little automotive split keepers on them. Meaning if you want to go to a stainless valve in the Predator non-Hemi engine generation 3, you either have to ream out the guides or install new ones. Can you tell I say that about 40 times a day? Small engine cams, yeah, that's Isky. They make great cams. I've got a few of their mid-range type cams. They work very, very well. He builds a very nice cam. I'm just trying to read through some of these here questions. Wow, Brian, it's odd that you're friends with me on Facebook. Okay, this guy just popped up here, Brian, and knows the name of my dog. I'm like, how you know the name of my dog? I forgot you're friends with me on my real Facebook page. But in case y'all didn't know, my son turned 5 in March, and my wife bombarded me. She had this bright idea of us having, well, it was both of our ideas actually, to he turned 5 in March. Hard to believe he's 5. And we had him a skating party. We rented out the skating rink, and instead of people bringing gifts for my overly spoiled child, that most of the stuff piled up on this table is stuff that we're fixing to get rid of or have a yard sale or just donate it somewhere, we decided that they should bring donations for our local humane society. You know, dog food, big dog food, dry dog food, dry cat food, you know, food bowls, water bowls. You know, humane societies always need stuff like that, and that's a good cause. So a lot of people brought that stuff. So we loaded up in the car after the party, and we get to the humane society, and I'm like, okay, I'll just grab all this stuff and take it in, because if I knew if my son heard a dog bark, he'd want to go see it. Oh no, we got to get a picture with him. So we get all the stuff out, in there on the couch. He hears dogs barking. The guy running the place says, hey, let's go walk one. Long story short, we come home with a daggum dog. Okay? I got snookered into it, but them two are as Jenny and Forrest was, like peas and carrots. They are made for each other. But he loves that dog to death, and the dog's pretty good with him. I would like to sometime, but anyway, he got to pick out her name, and at the time he was learning about signs and stuff at school, you know, stop signs, green signs, exit signs, bathroom signs, and there was a sign on the wall of a recycled, the little arrows, you know, somebody's recycle bin here. So he decided to name his dog Recycle. So we call her Psych for short. And I'm proud that you spelt that right, Brian, because most people spell it with an S. So that is the story of my son's dog that I hate. There's got to be another question here. How do you know how much overlap and scavenging that you need? Hey, all right. Depends on the amount of modifications you're doing to this engine. You know, if it's a stock engine, you don't want the exhaust to greatly outflow the intake. I tell people, you know, a basic way of head porting and stuff like that is to remember that it's much easier to push out a burned gas than it is to pull in wet air. Now, the more modified you get, you know, you really can't do much of stuff with the stock. Now, when you get to the stock appearing, the outlaws, the opens, full out, blown mod, you know that you're going to be getting a lot of fuel in, so you need to make sure that you can get a lot of burnt air out. You still need to make sure that the exhaust valve and seat are within a percentage, I don't know what's going on in my throat tonight, I can't really talk, of flow that the intake is. But that's where experimenting and porting and where flow benches come in at. Getting your head right and matching your cam to what kind of head you got. This is just overhead valving. We get into flathead stuff, the open stuff, the junior drag stuff. That's a whole other world there, and that takes us a different approach than this overhead valve stuff does. But if you're going to open up, if you're going to hog out the intake, you better have a big carb on there. You better have a good cam profile behind it, and you better do some work on the exhaust side, because you're going to be getting an awful lot of air in. You've got to get an awful lot of air out. Remember, these engines are nothing but air pumps. You got to get air in them, and you got to get air out of them. Just don't go crazy on the exhaust side, because if you got too much flow on the exhaust side, then you got to get really big headers. And yeah, she's fixing to push through that gate, so y'all might get to see the dog. But you just don't want to overflow the exhaust side to the point to where it's going to be hard to tune. Good flow in, good flow out, going to make great top end power. But you're wanting to tune through the mid range and bottom end. You're not all out drag racing here. Most people aren't. Most people with us are circle trackers. A lot of mini bikers coming in. A lot of them are drag racers. So, having a little more scavenging on those is better at times, because you're wanting that long end pull. Which you got to remember, if you're dirt track racing, you're gonna be on and off the throttle. You got to have something to come out the corner, go down the straightaway. You don't want it to start running right before you got to let off of it. That's not going to do you any good. So remember that when you're porting and with your cams and headers and stuff, is that you don't want to over scavenge these engines, especially on circle track. But most of the people that buy from, most of the average buyers, they're running stock appearing stuff. They're running they're drag racing mini bikes, small lawnmower stuff, so most of them are using basically stock heads. So it's really hard to really overflow the exhaust on these things, because you can't give it such a big valve in it, and you can't port it so much without going through the side of it or messing up where the studs go in and the header won't stay on it. So it's kind of hard to do that. But some of these guys with these billet heads, or heads that they weld. Dang, I had a head in here. I guess I moved it. They weld up the heads, and change the the exhaust flow and chamber and the design of it and stuff. And but if you're using a stock head, it's really hard to overflow the exhaust side. All right, I said I was going to try to talk about the billet cam here. Now, of course, this is a dyno cam. I just grabbed this one off the shelf, but I believe every cam manufacturer out there makes a billet adjustable cam. Luke McGee and them make one. Precision, Tim Iskandarian, all of them make very good cams. I highly recommend all of them. But for tonight, this is a dyno cam. You can see the little dinosaur right here. Now, these are adjustable cams. A lot of people use these and get them, and they don't know how to use them. I bought this cam, I took the gear off of it. How does it go back on? Simple. When you're using these gears, what this cam does is, there's supposed to be 6 bolts around here, but I've been sitting here taking them out while we've been talking. I left them loose. But those bolts around the center hold the gear on, of course. What else would they do? Got to make, nitpicky conversation. Well, I can't get this bolt out. There it goes. All right, take them bolts out, and the gear comes off of it. Oh my goodness, what happened? How do I get it back on? Because there's all these little numbers and dots all the way on. You see, there's a 4 right here. There's a 2. There's a -2 over there, a -4, a -6. What the heck's all them numbers mean? What that is advancement and retarding of the actual camshaft, the timing of the camshaft. Instead of moving the gear, turning the gear on the crankshaft, you do it like this. You can advance and retard your timing with thought I heard somebody pull up. Sorry. I'm here by myself and I'm scared. But you can advance and retard the timing of the cam with this gear. Now, the way you put it back on, when it comes, it's going to be on the little dyno mark right here, the little dinosaur, or they'll have a 0 mark there, or STD for standard. But I got this dot right here marked. Dog's gonna tearing up something. With yellow. And as you see, all the way around, there's other little dots. A little dot here, a little dot there, a little dot there, a little dot there. Below those dots are numbers. I don't know if you can see it. There's there's a 2 right there, and then negative on this side. That means that means you're backing the cam up 2 degrees, or you're advancing it 2 degrees. You're retarding it, or you're advancing it. Are you a good witch, or you're a bad witch? I don't know why I just said that. We watched Wizard of Oz the other night, and it was stuck in my head. But whatever number you want to move it to, the only thing you got to remember is the exhaust lobe. All right. The first lobe next to the gear is the exhaust lobe. With that pointing straight up, you line up whatever number you want to advance or retard the gear. If you want it straight up, you find the 0 or the dyno mark or whatever mark they got there for 0 and line it up with the bolt holes as close to in line with this exhaust lobe as you can get. Now, you want to advance it to, which that'll be the 2 by itself. Some cams have a +2 or -2. Dyno cams will say -2 or just standard 2. You want to go to +2. You line up the bolt holes and that dot with the 2 on, wherever the 2 is, right here, the dot's right here, as close to in line with this exhaust lobe as you can get it. They're not always going to line up dead perfect because you're moving the timing of the cam, so it's not going to line up perfect, but it needs to be in the area of that exhaust lobe. Alright, let's go 6 degrees. See, it's a little over here, but it is in line. All you want to do is get it in the vicinity of that exhaust lobe. That is your reference point when you're putting these gears back on. And so one thing you got to remember, in big stroke engines, if you're running, a stroker, or like in the the GX 390s with our stroker crankshaft in it, sometimes you got a clearance, around the crankshaft and stuff for these big cams and big strokes. If you clearance and then you move the timing of your cam, you might need to recheck your clearance, because sometimes it'll move the cam, because what you're doing is you're moving this around down here. You're going to line these dots up, and that's going to move the cam. That's going to move the lobes one way or the other. It ain't a lot. It's just a little bit. But, you could have been close in one area. So if you have to do clearancing with, a big lobe cam, big stroke, stuff like that, and you move the cam, you might need to recheck your clearances to make sure that everything's all right. But that's the basics on how to use a billet cam. And if you're running high RPM, strokers, stock stroke, big bore, whatever, you turn in a lot of RPMs with a lot of spring pressure, I highly recommend these billet cams. With the gear, you ain't got to use the gear, but I recommend them for strength and for wear. I've used, a lot of these cast cams from Isky, from McGee, from, Precision, a bunch in these high RPM engines, and had no problem with them. But I do see, like with the bigger stroker stuff, people putting bigger stroke cranks than what they're designed for, like people putting flathead cranks in Hondas and stuff like that. You're going to have to use these billet cams on a small base circle, because you're going to have to do some grinding in here for the rod, and you got to have that strength of that good steel to do that. Alright, that is the basics, very basic, which is all I'm trying to do here, is just be basic, give everybody the basics, and help them make their own decisions. And what the heck happened to them? There they go. You know, I really try not to get into too much stuff, because it does affect, you know, our dealers and stuff like that. I've had phone calls, you know, you shouldn't have talked about that, you shouldn't have said that, you know, so I try my best not to get into too much stuff. With, you know, except with head design and flow and stuff like that, we can talk about. But what do you? When you get a chance, do a GoPro on a chassis on the track. Dude, I've got like 20 GoPro videos that are me on the track. In fact, I just put up our videos from when we was in Charlotte the other week. Charlotte was fun. Charlotte was a lot of fun. There's a lot of questions I had to even see. Oh, good Lord. But Charlotte was really good. The WKA, I went and run the road race at Charlotte. Of course, they had the dirt track going too. I went over there one night, and that place was super stupid fast over there. But I run the road racing on the inside, on the speedway. And Charlotte's a lot rougher than what it looks like on TV. It's really rough on a go-kart. But we run part of the Roval, and the Man Cup Sprint Series run the other half. But it was really fun to run on that track. A lot of history up there. Just a pleasure to, you know, an honor to run the place. And you know, we lucked up and won our class the second day. The first day got rained out. There was like 2 classes left. We was the last class of the day, and it was us and another class, and we got rained out on Saturday. But Sunday we had a couple of good fortunes go our way, and we wound up, you know, lucking up and win the second day. But that track was really fun, and they're gonna do some changing on it next year. I'm thinking this is going to be a yearly thing for WKA and Charlotte to run like they do in Daytona. You know, they'll have the dirt track outside, and inside they'll have the Man Cup Sprint Series and the Speedway Sprint Series, which is what I run sometimes. So I'm hoping it'll be an every 6-month super show, as I call it. You'll have Daytona in December, and then Charlotte in June. The weather was great. It was hot, but it wasn't like ungodly hot. We got rain one day, but it was nice up there. I really enjoyed it. Looking forward to going back next year. How do you tell what size cam you have? I have a cheetah cam with no numbers other than a duration. You don't have 302 duration. You might have 302 lift. There's a quick way to measure. The best way to measure a cam is to put it in the engine and put a dial indicator on it, zero it out, measure the cam full lift. If it's a cheetah, you know, call the cam manufacturer. Well, you really can't. Other than putting it in the engine, that's the only accurate way to do it. You know, there's measurements you can do with math, but the only accurate way to do it is to actually put it in the engine with a dial indicator, and you know, set your lash at 0 and go off the push rod will give you the actual lift of the cam. You go off the retainer to give you the lift of the cam plus the rockers at the valve. So, what head do you recommend for a stock appearing F275 1-3 roll? You know, depends on the stock appearing. If it's for the Georgia stock appearing, the biggest valves they can run in that is a 2725, 670 carb. Don't go crazy on the porting. A lot of people go crazy on the porting when they stock appearings, and it kills your velocity, it kills your bottom end. I do some moderate porting on the intake side and moderate porting on the exhaust side. You whatever I do on the intake, I try to match on the exhaust. If I go, cleaning up just cleaning up the sharp edges, rolling stuff around, I do the same thing on the exhaust. If I'm, taking the guide out, reshaping the head, I try to do the same thing on the exhaust. But it depends on what stock appearing you're running. A lot of people run the 5-foot rule, which is it gotta look stock from 5 feet, so you can run strokers, you can run big bore, do what you want to the bottom end, and it's just gonna vary. But with a 670 carb, the F275 and 1-3s is a lot of times my first choice. That's what I run in an awful lot of. I've been doing some experimenting with cams and stock appearings and stuff like that here lately on different lobe designs on each side of the cam. It's been working pretty good. I'm trying to finalize on an actual grind, and it might be something that we release, an actual, stock appearing cam. Could I please talk about drag racing mini bikes? What you want to talk about? Everything here, I might mention circle track and drag, but everything here that I do usually goes either way. I hate saying that phrase, but it could go circle track or drag racing. But a lot of times in drag racing, when I'm talking to the circle track guys about not over porting their heads or over valving their head or over camming, that can play into y'all's aspect, because that's kind of what y'all need to do is, more lift, more duration, more of the high-end power stuff, because a lot of the drag racing mini bikes, a lot of them run regular clutches like we do on a cart. So they take off and they run the 1/8 of a mile with a clutch. That they got to have some high RPM power. Most of them's turning well into the 9s when they cross the line. So you're going to want those higher lift cams, with, more worried more about flow in a head instead of worried about velocity in a head. Because you're on the throttle wide open all the way through and you never let off. Which is the opposite. Well, I wouldn't say the opposite, but it's not what the circle track engine builders really try to look for. Detroit. Am I running South Georgia Cartway this week? Am I running at South Georgia Cartway this weekend? I plan on it. The Georgia Unlimited All-Star Series and the Georgia Stock Appearing Series is going to be at Valdosta this weekend, South Georgia Cartway. This is race number 5 of the season for the Georgia Unlimited All-Stars, and I will be running Unlimited All-Star this weekend. I will have one of my stock appearing engines on one of my guys' carts this weekend so they can run the Georgia Stock Appearing class. That class is an 80% payback. Now next year, I plan on doing with the Georgia Stock Appearings, like I've done with the Georgia Unlimited All-Stars, is we're going to run a point series. I've got 4 or so tracks picked out. I've talked to already. It's going to be, I believe, an 8-race series, and at the end of the year, we're going to give away a leather jacket. We're going to give away prizes, awards. It'll be a point series, just like the Georgia Unlimited All-Stars is now. So y'all get your stock appearings ready, because it's going to be on next year with the stock appearings. And the rules for the Georgia stock appearing is not the 5-foot rule. We have actual rules in this series. The series can be found at the Facebook page of Georgia Stock Appearing Series. And the rules are posted. They're what they call a sticky at the top of the page. The rules, I've gone over some stock appearing stuff on here before, but the rules, a lot of people like to argue me with these rules, but there's really nothing to argue about with these rules, because the rules are done for dependability, for affordability and dependability. You get a very good engine out of this, and the engine should last you most of the season. Stuff that most everything can be bought right off the shelf, other than a little bit of head porting. But check it out, Georgia Stock Appearing Series on Facebook, because we're gonna go full bore next year, starting probably in March. Good center line for a 1/16 mile momentum track Talladega using a CL4. CL4, I believe, is a 113 or 114 center line. Talladega, you need, mid-range to top-end power. CL3 will be a good one. CL4, I'll use Eric Voss's, the EV6. And a cam I've been using quite a bit here lately is the new one from Precision. It's called the 2K19, I believe is the number of it. The number 2, the letter K, number 19. It's in the area of, the Eric Voss cam. Really good mid-range to top-end power. It took me a little bit of different, setup with the carburetor to figure out, because it's got a little different profile on it. But it's a really good cam also. Either the CL3, the CL4, the EV6, or the new Precision 2K19. I keep forgetting that number. All those cams are good. Get your springs set right, 815, lightweight lifters, lightweight retainers, and she'll be good to, 68, 69, probably 7,000. Stock rockers on most of these engines are, except for the Hemi, like the Clone, the Honda, the non-Hemi Predator, they're in the area of 1-to-1. Some of them's a little bit taller, some of them's a little bit shorter, but they're in the area of 1-to-1 ratio. So the Hemi, all the ones I've checked, on the cam have been a little over, they're like 1.1-to-1. They're a little bit longer, most of them are, but best thing to remember is just they're all 1-to-1s. Stock Predator head, 36-pound springs, and F275 cam. Yowzer. F275 cam, like I was saying earlier, is a high duration cam. Fast ramps. Hold on, let me know what that is. Fast ramp cam, 36-pound spring would be the minimum I would use, and I would have it set up with whatever rockers I'm using at the cam. The spring would be 60,000 from Coilbine. You need all the spring pressure you can get, but you can use it. It's just it's rough on the valve train. Scott McCullum was watching. Man, I thought you fell in a hole a long time ago. I ain't heard from you so long. I guess somebody come over from the Grey Goats show. Eric said, hey. 5-hour endurance race on a mini bike. Holy crap. Somebody gonna be saddlebred. Are you asking for endurance on the bike or yourself? First of all, if I was doing a 5-hour endurance bike, stock internals, you better be sure that connecting rod is sized right. Because if it's not, I don't care what oil you're running, it's gonna start galding and it's gonna seize up and it's gonna come out the front. Make sure the clearances on that stock rod, 2.5 minimum. I try to shoot for 3,000s. If you can, I would have a billet rod and a billet flywheel on it at the minimum, because that billet rod needs to be sized also. But with the oil dipper on it, it's just going to oil better and it's going to last longer. But for a 5-hour race, the reason I'm telling you to make sure the rod, especially the stock rod, is clearance right, is you're going to have to run a little thicker oil in it. Because if you're running 5 hours straight, most karting oils is going to thin out because they're going to get so hot, and it's going to thin out and it's going to lower your protection. You need to run a high zinc karting oil, something with some good zinc and additives in it. Don't run no 520. You need to run at least a good 30 weight. Just make sure it's clearance and everything is to spec, and it should be all right. And get some icy hot for after you ride for 5 hours. You're probably gonna need it. I actually got to ask this question an awful lot, and people know after a while, but nobody's actually ever come out and said it. If you put a Predator crank in a clone engine, do you use a Predator cam or a clone cam? You use the cam that goes with the block. If you put in a Predator crankshaft in a clone block, you got to use a clone cam. Now, if you're putting a clone crankshaft in a Predator engine, which is the de-stroking thing that I don't know why people do, you're going to use the cam that goes with that block. It doesn't matter what crankshaft is in there, you're using the cam that goes with the block, because the Hondas, the clones, and the Hemi Predators all take the same cam. The non-Hemi Predator, the cam on it, the journals that actually go inside the block are a little bit bigger, so you have to use the cam that goes with the block. It doesn't matter what crankshaft you use. Average build cost on a stock appearing for my rules. I usually don't like talking my engine business on here because this is an ARC page. Give me a call at the shop or email me and we can talk about stuff like that. But that's for me to build it, because now for the parts for it, you can build a really, really, really good engine for $400 to $700, depending on the quality of parts you use. Like if you want to use the best of the best, you want to use a Honda block, and you can use a Honda block in this series, bored out to 2756, which is the maximum bore. Use a billet side cover. Use the best flywheel, the little 3-horse flywheel, which is, I love those little things. Buy you a good store-bought car, buy you a good store-bought head. You're looking $600-700 for that, but that's going to be the best of the best. You can build one out of a clone block or a Predator block, especially a Predator block that's already bored to 2756. Use a Predator crankshaft, and you can build a really good engine for $400, $500, $600. And if everything is assembled right, clearance right, torque right, and all, this engine, you're looking at 75 to 7,800 RPMs. It's going to last you most of the season. Probably, what's an average season for Saturday night? 15, 16 races? Probably after about 8 races, change the rod bolts and the rod bearings, keep on going. End of the year, rebuild the whole engine. With the way these engines are built and the parts that the rules say you got to use, it makes good power, but it's a very dependable engine also. Oh, I really got to act right now. Mr. Jimmy Rivers is watching me. The Valvoline V1R that's a pretty good shell for what you're using there. I'd either use the 30 weight V1R or the 10W30 Royal Purple for what you're going to use, a 5-hour endurance race. I'd use either one of those two. And Matthew also, that is who asked that question. Yeah, Matthew. Of course, we got carburetors for the stock appearing. I can do heads, or you can call, man right here, Jimmy Rivers is on here, JPRW. He does heads, he does carburetors, he bores blocks. You can buy Honda blocks from him already bored. I believe, Luke McGee was up here. He builds a very good stock appearing carburetor. He's got one of the CNC carburetors. He got Cam. There's a lot of people on this site tonight that, if you're looking for stock appearing stuff, just scroll through, man. They're all on here tonight. There's somebody else on here I need to mention too about stuff like that. I guess I lost it. It's too far down. I need to get some of these questions. But just there's a lot of builders on the page tonight, on the video tonight. Just the sky's the limit when it comes to stock appearing, man. There's a lot of good people out there, doing a lot of really good work. Torque on a stock rod, I typically torque them 120 inch-pounds. after I clearance them and stuff like that. The ARC rods are always 170 inch-pounds, both of them with oil on the threads. Any block that is made, originally designed for a Clone 196, a Honda GX200, or a Predator 212 is legal in the Georgia stock appearing rules for my rules for Georgia stock appearing. You know, the Tilliston block, the fact the one that's running Saturday night is one of the new Tilliston blocks. It's got the little brace on the top of it. But yeah, if it's originally built for Clone 196, Honda GX200, Predator 212, the Ducar 212, the Tilliston 212, the BSP Box Stock Project 212, any of those blocks are legal. And you can mismatch parts. You can take a Honda block and put a Hemi head on it. You know, whatever you need to do. Ooh. How many races would you say a billet rod is good for? Well, I like to say that the parts are only as good as the people using it, and since I see who asked that question, probably as long as you own the engine. Somewhere down the road years ago, those rods were nicknamed the unbreakable rod. There's nothing out there that's unbreakable. And I'll say it to your face like, oh, what's his name? I can't think of his name. I'll say it right to your face. Nothing is unbreakable. But a billet rod does have a lifespan, just like anything else, it fatigues out. I'm going to say it depends on the length of the rod and what it's used for. The short stock length rods, they're pretty beefy. They'll have a good lifespan. I've got some that, you know, of course, it's my job to test this stuff. That's just what I do. Is one of my jobs at ARC is they make it, I break it. And I put stuff through RPM cycles that most people don't. You know, those rods have a heavier piston on them. They have a shorter rod ratio. In a video I done a while back about rod ratios and stuff, that's a pretty violent action in there. You know, like the longer the rod gets, the easier it is in the cycle on the stress of it. But you got a little lightweight thin piston that you cut on up there that's flexing also, so you got to take that into consideration. But everything has a life cycle on it. If you can't get a season out of them, you know, back off on your build or something. But as far as the lifespan on it, there really is no answer on it. It's all depending on if it was installed right, if it's being run right, is all the clearances right, because a lot of people, you know, they're dead set on having that zero head clearance. You got to have zero deck on my block, you know. And then they put a 10,000 gasket on it, which means the piston eventually is going to start hitting the head and it's going to beat the bearing out of it and it's going to break the rod. If everything is done right, you shouldn't have to worry about rods. I've got engines that I've tortured that have multiple rebuilds on them. So it just kind of depends on what you're using it for and everything is right, but the rod shouldn't be nothing that you're worried about. Now, like in the junior dragster stuff, you know, and open outlaw stuff, you know, that's got the really long strokes, stuff like that, you can kind of take a little life cycle out of it. Alright, well, unfortunately, I'm fixing to have to get off because my phone is going dead. I just got the second low battery notification. But anyway, a lot off subject here with some of these questions, but I kind of hope I answered some questions about cams and that. You know, I know I didn't get into head design stuff too much. I try to keep that stuff for another topic, try to stay on topic, but you know, throughout the last couple of weeks, I've been writing down questions that I get, and lift and duration is you know, how much duration do I need? How much lift do I need? That's kind of why I stay on the lift and duration a lot tonight, because that's what I get the most of. Not much folks regular finna get off, and here comes the kid in. So maybe my battery won't go dead. But anyway, I hope I answered the questions you need. If not, you know, just either question, ask me here, send me an email, call me at the shop. I'll talk about pretty much anything you want to talk about on the phone. Landon. Yeah, my battery's about dead, son. Hurry up.
Hurry up. Hurry. Come on.
Underlay, amigo. Come on.
Move side.
All right, come here. There he is. He's here. Oh, good God, you're getting big, boy. All right. Everybody wanted to see you, so say hey.
Hey,
Don't sound too excited.
I'm too excited.
You're too excited. All right. What you got in your hand? You got a car boat? Car boat? Down right there. There you
I
go.
will jump.
You gonna jump it? Okay. Did you have fun at the YMCA today?
We're gonna crash.
Did you have fun at the YMCA today?
Yeah. Wait, I didn't go to the YMCA.
That's right. You went to Mimi's Day. Did you go to the movies? What is that?
Gamefield.
Can't. Where does that go in?
The race car.
The race car what? Goes in a race car engine.
Engine.
All right.
It's a
All
part of the heart.
The part that you're right. That's the heart of the engine. Good job, buddy. That's the heart of the engine. That's what tells it everything else to work.
Yep.
Good job.
Does it spin?
It does spin. All right. Well, like I said, my battery's fixing to go dead, so we finna have to say goodnight. Well, it's almost
But
dead.
I want to make faces.
You want to make faces?
Yeah.
We'll make faces. Oh, I know what you want to do. I don't know how to do that from here. I don't know what to do.
No,
Yeah. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry.
No, Dad, you do this.
I know, but I don't know how to do it. Okay. I can't believe I'm going to do this on the ARC page. There it is.
How's Princess?
I don't know. These are not very good ones here. I'm sorry.
And
We're going to Area 51. I got me an alien at Area 51. Oh my goodness.
dude, now it's your turn.
You want me to do it? Oh, there I am. Hello. I'm pretty sure these people really enjoying this. There's my alien again. Alright, well since you're an alien, you gotta tell everybody bye.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Wait, don't touch it. That's all we got, buddy.
No one that does
I don't know where that one's at, baby. Look, the I'm... Okay.
No. That way.
Yeah, we gotta go.
No.
Alright. Since we're Wolfface, we gotta
The
tell
gold
everybody
one,
bye.
the gold one.
Alright, we'll do one more, okay?
The gold one.
There you go. I don't know what that is. Well, I think my battery's dead. Oh, money comes out. Alright, we got to get off now because my battery's about dead.
But I'm gonna be it.
Remember Baby Shark?
I'm mad.
You mad? Alright. Alright, that's enough. Now,
No.
alright, we gotta tell everybody bye.
I'm gonna
Baby.
do the one that does. Bleh.
It ain't on there, baby. It's not on there.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
See that face?
You wanna go get your doggy? Where's that dog at? Alright. Anyway, I'm sure y'all enjoyed that. I lost about 100 viewers there. So, anyway. There we go. Alright.
Do the good ones. Do the good ones.
Okay, I didn't get no more questions. Alright. Well, you wanna tell everybody bye?
No.
Yes, you do. Alright, tell everybody bye. Say thank y'all for stopping in. Send me an email.
Wait, I still want to be heard.
All right. Say send me an email if you got any more questions, and we'll see y'all next video. Say thank you. Thanks for stopping by.
I never.
You never would.
Say goodbye.
Oh, I'll say it for you then. Bye.
No.
You can mash the button. Mash that button right there.
Don't do goodbye.
Mash that button right there. Bye.
No, don't.